Hi there, Megan Thompson here with Megan Thompson Coaching, and today we are going to cover parenting your sensitive child and whether or not you need a label. So stay tuned if you're wondering if your child needs to be labeled with some sort of mental health disorder diagnosis in order to receive supports in the school setting or in any other setting. So here at MTC, we help parents of highly sensitive kids break out of the meltdown cycle and do this in as little as 8 weeks, especially for children who are having daily meltdowns, multiple times a day meltdowns, or hitting, kicking, screaming, running away, or shutting down and closing in on themselves. And we do this through the work that we do directly with parents. And so what that means is that we actually don't work directly with children in our typical fashion of working for 8 straight weeks in breaking out of the meltdown cycle. In our signature program called Boot Camp, we don't have contact with the children. And so what's really important to understand is that we get this type of result through you as a parent. So what does that mean? That means that you can do this too. This is absolutely something that your child can break out of through their relationship with you, because highly sensitive children learn through their relationship with you. They don't learn through their relationship in any other setting in terms of emotion regulation and not just symptom reduction, but symptom elimination of the meltdown cycle. So one thing that I think is really important for us to cover in this show today, and I'm going to continue on my theme of having these shows be quick right now, because we know parents are, everybody is scrambling to either start the school year or school year has started. September is pretty busy, so bite size is useful for you, I know. And it's important for us to keep this punchy, because there's so much content that I've generated over the years that if you want to learn more about this topic, you can absolutely do a deep dive into the years and years of content that I've generated. And I'm sure that if this is the first show that you've watched of mine or listened to of mine, that you will absolutely go hunting for different topics, and I'll let you do that on your own time. So you can keep focused on what's important to your family right this moment at this super busy time of year. So I want to dive into this topic on a high level today, related to the experience you might be having as your child is coming into the school year, whether they've started a couple of weeks ago or they're about to start. Labor Day was yesterday at the time of this recording, and so it might be something that's just very much on the top of your mind. Or if you're homeschooling, it might be something that you're wondering whether or not your child needs a label to access supports in your local community. And so I want us to take a look at the personality trait and what that means. When we think about temperament compared to personality, sometimes these things are used interchangeably. But when your child is stuck in a meltdown cycle, that's not part of the temperament trait. That's the temperament trait acting in a dysfunctional way. So I know that that's hard to hear as a parent, and it's you know that. Your child isn't living their best life. Your family isn't living their best life. So it's really important to understand where the behavior is, where the root cause of the behavior is coming from. And this is actually coming from a family dynamic issue. So my quick answer to you is, in terms of whether or not you need a label, the answer is no. The label is a family dysfunction issue. So if we look at what I mean by that, I mean that you leading your child to learn the emotion regulation skills that they need to learn are the change agent. You're the catalyst for change in your family. And so labeling your child isn't necessary. You don't need to slap a personality trait on your kid and acronyms and send them to school with a letter, or have a psychologist or a neuropsychologist or a neurologist do an evaluation, or a pediatrician do an evaluation, and have letters and codes assigned to your child to follow them for the rest of your life. And I'm saying this definitively because I have gone so deep on this topic in multiple different ways. And you can comment below on this video, or you can email in if this is the podcast. If you want access to those shows, we're happy to point you in the right direction. You can also look on our blog, because all of our shows are on my blog page on the website. But what's important for you to hear right now is that sensory processing sensitivity is a temperament, just like introverted. And you don't send your kid to school with a t-shirt that says, I'm an introvert, and say, hey, teacher, my kid's an introvert. So you need to treat them like an introvert. You say, hey, this is my daughter. Her name is Sally, and she tends to keep to herself sometimes, and other times she wants to engage with other people, and it takes some energy for her, and she recharges by having some time alone. If your child was an introvert, you would say that, right? Now, same thing for a child who's highly sensitive. My child feels deeply and processes the world deeply, and may experience subtle changes as big for them if they're struggling with their emotions. And all of that language is something that you can absolutely run with without using a title behind it. And critical for parents these days when you're choosing not to put your kid in a box that is label focused, right? There's so many labels that can be really misinformed for kids, and a misinterpretation of what children need. And that's coming from a lot of professionals, right? Now, obviously, the trait coined by Elaine Aron has a title: highly sensitive person or highly sensitive child. Not deeply feeling child, not explosive child, not introverted child or extroverted child, or anything like that. And it's also true that the research-focused term is sensory processing sensitivity. So sensitivity, that's where it comes from, right? But the key word in the middle here, processing, is what's critical. And it is so overlooked in any of these other fad pop psychology professionals who are throwing terms out and talk about all kinds of needs. Your anxious kid, your depressed kid, your irritable kid, your deeply feeling kid, your explosive kid, your critical kid, your school refusal kid. Those are all labels that are characterizing your child based on their behavior that is a symptom of a meltdown cycle. And so what we're doing is we're looking downstream and saying, the worst case scenario of how this is playing out with your kid losing their mind on a daily basis and struggling with their big behavior and chucking stuff and kicking, we're going to characterize them from that place. We're going to name them that. That sucks. Pardon my French, but that's awful for your child, right? And so you as a parent know that, and you often might even be fighting with your co-parent or spouse who recognizes this as well. And so I want to be talking about this from that level, because the first important piece to notice is that it is super important for us to be cautious of labels these days. I mean, alphabet soup is all around town, and people can take the use of a label as an empowering experience, as a broken, in an effort to break stigma that can actually be very damaging. Now, I'm speaking from a place of being a mental health therapist. And so as a licensed clinician who left the mental health industry for many reasons, it's important to notice I kept my license. I'm not, I didn't leave because I was kicked out. I left of my own accord, right? Stopped running my practice because of the work that we do here in the coaching world is faster, better, more efficient for families. They're happier because of the well-rounded approach that we take. And we're not constrained with the typical, spend an hour and go on your merry way approach. that families are used to in the mental health industry that actually keeps them stuck. And so when I look at this from that standpoint, one thing that I know in the mental health industry, and don't get me wrong, 70% of our clients are in the helping field. So you might be a therapist yourself as a parent listening in. And so many of our clients are reaching outside of the industry because of the broken components to the system. And I'm not here to go fight that good fight. This is the fight I'm fighting here, which is eliminating suicidal actions for highly sensitive kids around the world by stopping the meltdown cycle one family at a time. And so we do that, right? Because we know where this is headed if we don't stop it. And some of you come to us and it's already gotten to that level of intensity. I don't sugarcoat that. This isn't the first time you're hearing me say that. It's not the last time either. But that's not the focus of this video or this show. Okay? So, what's the focus? The focus is the label. The focus is focusing on what you need to do. Why should you label your child? What's the purpose of a label? And when I say it's important to get started by being cautious, in today's polarized day and age, especially on social media, if you are a mental health advocate, you might feel some kind of way. This might be an offensive comment to you. You might initially have a trigger point. And I encourage you to be mindful of that because when we think about advocating for eliminating stigma, the stigma isn't in advocating for touting the label as an identity. That's what's showing up on TikTok or on any other social platform right now, for sure, right? My name is Joe and I have XYZ diagnosis. And that's who I am. Joe XYZ. That's where our society has come to these days, especially with young adults all over social media. And there's an immaturity level to that type of destigmatization that I'm going to speak about. And I use the word immature, which indicates judgment. Because when we think about destigmatizing a label, what's important for us to make sure that we're doing is to not forget the purpose of destigmatizing a label is to empower somebody. It's to empower somebody to ask for help. It's to keep somebody from isolating themselves. And it's to keep somebody from choosing not to ask for help because they're shamed. And my invitation to you here is to notice that you can do that without staunchly declaring an ineffective label used as a crutch. There is a middle way. There is a path that is available that does not have to tack these ineffective letters after your kid's name as that carries, is carried with them for the rest of their life, like a mental health diagnosis or some other ineffective label that's inappropriate. Right? And I'm not saying not all mental health diagnoses are ineffective. Don't put words in my mouth. But we can do that. We can empower our children to notice that they process the world in a deep way, and that means they also process their feelings in a deep way, and they notice subtle details in a deep way, and they can become overstimulated in a deep way if they're overwhelmed and that their environment isn't cultivated in a way that helps them grow, but rather throws them to the wolves and tells them to suck it up. Then what happens is we start using a label as a crutch because we're not setting the tone in the environment. And the environment is critical for us as parents. Now, I said I was going to keep this short, and I got to check time because I am on a roll. So, this is a soapbox of mine. I'm going to try to keep it short. I don't know if I can do it. Okay. So when we look at it from that lens, it is so important to be working from that perspective. I'm raising a highly sensitive child myself, my husband and I, and we have 2 children. One is just turned 1 at the time of this recording, and our other daughter is 7, and my first, and she's highly sensitive. For sure. And when we look at the important piece to that, I know that for sure. And we're not in the meltdown cycle. She does not have daily meltdowns. She never had daily meltdowns beyond age 18 months. And even at 18 months, I would say it wasn't daily, but my memory might not serve me the best. In that respect, she was definitely having meltdowns as a toddler for sure, which is developmentally appropriate. You've heard me say this before as well. But her meltdowns were not in a cycle because, I help clients break out of that cycle. So I practice what I preach. And I want to use this from a standpoint of understanding the next piece, right? When we look at making sure that you're cautious of using a label, I don't introduce my kid as highly sensitive to Joe Schmo on the street, to the camp counselor, to any sort of provider whom I hire to help me lead her. And this is important, right? So when I think about that, what do I mean? We have childcare providers is what I'm getting at. We homeschool, so we have a hybrid model in that respect as well, where I have support. I'm not the only one helping educate my child at this point. And it is important for us to, to sign her up for different activities and extracurriculars, etc. And so I'm not leading the charge from a place of advocating for my child based on her label. Now, this is really important because point number 2, when we think about label, is to advocate and avoid confrontation, right? Confrontation could very well be leading the charge with a label that has a stigma attached. And because you are one person as a parent, because your child is one person as a child, it is not your child's job to change everybody's mind about a mental health diagnosis. Point blank, it's not. So you get to decide how much you share about your personal experiences. And this is one of the things that we coach our clients on. And I want to use myself as an example here. Okay. So over the summer, we put our daughter in camp. I had signed her up for a few camps over the summer. And in one of those camps, there was a focus of growth mindset for persistence purposes on the focus of the camp. And what was critical to understand is that it was actually a misguided and ineffective use of the growth mindset principles, right? And so I know a little bit about this, having founded the Resilience Rewiring protocol that we use with our clients in our work, right? I tend to study how to rewire the brain and understand neuroscience as well as childhood emotional development. So I understand resilience very well and effectively. I don't lead with that when I sign my kid up for stuff, right? Because I want her to be able to experience the world in a way that I'm not putting her in a bubble. I don't bubble wrap my kid. And I also don't curate her life in a way that shelters her. So yes, we homeschool. No, I don't shelter my kid. And so in these circumstances, what's important to understand is that my passion is obviously very thorough. I have a podcast, for Pete's sakes. We serve clients around the world, right? And so I feel very strongly about this. And we teach this day in and day out with our clients. And it's so important to understand that I never lead with anger and frustration when I'm teaching anyone, even with my child, right? Angry advocacy backfires. So you need to be able to speak with not just intelligence, but also confidence and certainty and flexibility and capability, right? You have to be able to politely educate others. So when we get to what's happening, there's great intentions, but misguided application of teaching growth mindset to the children in my child's camp. And so when I, break this down to the coach, to the camp counselor, I help them notice that the application of the skill that they're teaching isn't effective. Okay. I want to get you a little bit more visibility to this. I'll be more specific. One of the things that's so important about growth mindset, especially for highly sensitive children, but for children alike, is that the core purpose of teaching your child to have a growth mindset is to help them persist through challenge. We know highly sensitive children, as all children, need a growth mindset. Any leader in the world needs to be able to tolerate and persist through challenge because life isn't about sugar plums and rainbows. And it's also true that it's not awful either when you feel persistent, you feel empowered by your own decisions, and you can go through challenge. Life is very, very rewarding, right? So we're not saving children from strife. We're also not making them suffer for more, right? Because life can be very enjoyable right now when we notice how to recognize challenges as opportunities. And so in order to teach that to your child, that's a lifelong and also most of the day focus, right? Teaching love for learning in all kinds of ways is something that a principle that we focus on in my home. And I teach our clients how to do that effectively in their homes. And so I send my kid to camp, okay? And I'm not here to gossip. This is not the focus. But the camp counselor is teaching, and all of the camp counselors are teaching how to persist through a challenge by saying, you're not allowed to say, I can't. If you do that, you have to do 5 push-ups. So here's what's wrong with that whole application, right? A child who is learning growth mindset is expected to be growing, which means we are expecting them to not be perfect, right? And so if we are expecting them to not be perfect, because perfectionism for highly sensitive kids is one of the root causes, not the only, one of the root causes of a lack of persistence is wanting to get it right the first time, especially for highly sensitive kids. And so perfectionism actually leads to a fixed mindset. If I didn't get it right, then I can't get it at all. Okay? So the first time you say I can't, if that comes out of your mouth, you have to do 5 push-ups. Now, my kid is an active kid, so she doesn't see push-ups as punishment, thank goodness, right? But some kids do, right? I mean, you put me in for doing 5 push-ups as a child, I would have been hands up, that's a punishment. I don't like doing push-ups. I didn't when I was a child. And so no, thank you. No, thank you. I was not, never perceived myself as athletic. It would have been a huge deterrent for me to get it wrong or to say the wrong thing. And my child's 7. These children in this camp, they're between the ages of 6 and, I think that you had to be 7 to register for that camp. 6 and 13, 7 and 13, something like that. Okay. So we're talking middle elementary to, to 8th grade. Depending on when the kids, going into 8th grade, because 13-year-olds. Okay, so this is that age range. These are children who are just learning how to persist through challenge, who are just learning to show self-compassion, developmentally speaking, right? We would say that that's a developmentally appropriate goal to help them learn how to be compassionate to themselves, to help them learn how to persist through challenge and have the challenges be hard, right? So this camp that my kid wanted to do, circus camp. So she's doing tricks that are not taught in her gymnastics class or any other thing, right? And most kids aren't going to circus class, right? So it's new for all of them. So I hear about this, and my daughter just says, I don't like that, Mom. It wasn't fair. I loved doing the push-ups. It was okay. But I didn't really like that. I said it twice. I said I can't twice. But she wouldn't even let me get out the rest of my sentence. I was saying I can't get it on the board. Not that I can't do it. But what they told us is the push-ups came when I can't do it. So here's what's wrong with this. Adults who are trying to teach growth mindset to a child are having a hairpin trigger the second those first 2 words come out, which is the initial presumption, I can't do it. We don't want our children who we're teaching resiliency to say things like I can't do it, because that speaks to their identity of somebody who isn't effective at reaching their goals, and we don't want them to speak that into existence for long, right? But if we harp on and we punish them the second that the words come out of their mouth, what happens? Discouragement, frustration. They respond to judgment and they judge themselves. Self-critical. They become self-critical. And those are all perpetuators of a fixed mindset. Hello. So I have an emotional reaction, not to my kid. I didn't express that, but internally, for sure. Right? Internally. And so I asked my daughter, what did she want to do? Right? I said, because she's been in situations where we've needed to ask for, I've coached her to advocate with adults I've coached her to ask for help. I've coached her to apologize. I've coached her to help them navigate peer situations, help my child navigate peer situations. I've coached all of this because my daughter is a young leader. This is how we run our household. And so when we're doing all of this, she's having this conversation with me, in the car. And she's saying, I didn't like that. I didn't appreciate it. I was working on it, and I was trying to say something, and the counselor didn't even let me finish my sentence, which, she's an intelligent kid, and she knew this whole sentence she wanted to say wasn't what the counselor was assuming she wanted to say, which was, stomping and quitting and I can't do it and blah, whatever sort of whiny, complainy, ineffective behavior that somebody with a fixed mindset is doing a lot of, right? And I'm not asking everybody who works with my child to understand the personality trait, nor am I asking them to even understand temperament. One would love to, I would love that, right? That if I could put my kid in that bubble and grow them in that bubble, she would be thriving, right? But that's not real life. I'm not expecting that. And I don't, send my kid with a book, an instruction manual off to these experiences. And I'm realistic here, but I'm also recognizing resiliency means and understanding the personality trait. My child learns through me. She doesn't learn through anybody else. She learns through the relationship she has with her parents. And so what that means is that I get to help her learn how to navigate this and choose. Okay, so in this circumstance, she chose for me to help her advocate with the counselor. Okay, so the counselor and I get on the phone, we talk about it, and she doubles down. Yeah, I know how kids learn. I used to teach, right? If that's the way that you're teaching, then, whether you taught in a school or know how to teach is two different things, right? So I'm not going to get into this argument. I'm not going to have a conversation criticizing the person's capacity and their professional background. All I'm doing in this dynamic is saying I can appreciate your intentions, and your approach is counterproductive, right? And so in that process, we were able to come to a conclusion that she would be shifting her approach, and that I was happy to share or explain more if she needed to. There was some sort of indicator that she might not have been the developer of the plan. She was the carrier outer. That's not the right word. She was carrying out the plan, right? And that she was going to be able to follow through in an effective way with my child, and hopefully with the other children. But that's not my. That's what I employed her to do, but I'm only in charge of my own child's development. So a calm presence allowed for the person to not just argue based on misunderstanding, right? But we were able to have a conversation. Was it perfect? No. Do I have influence beyond this person helping me raise my child for 5 days? No. Do I need that? No, because I'm not signing my kid up for a semester-long thing. I'm signing her up for a 5-day camp, right? So I didn't need to go further than where it was. But what's important for you to understand is that being able to advocate doesn't mean that you need to slap a label. My child's highly sensitive. She takes punishment very intensely. Punishment doesn't teach. Punishment perpetuates shame. Punishment perpetuates sneaky behavior. My child will choose not to speak in front of you, just like most children will. Or they will talk down to themselves in their own mind. If they don't let you see it, they will muscle up and stuff their own emotions. All children do that, not just highly sensitive children. This camp counselor didn't need a lecture, because lectures don't teach either, right? And I didn't need to teach from a place of that level of intensity, because I felt confident in my capacity to serve my child and serve this professional in taking good care of my child without being resentful. And I knew that if I had to or needed to, we would pull her out of camp if it went south, right? So everything was on the table. Nothing required urgency and anger from urgency, right? Or scarcity from a place of feeling like I needed this person to believe me, or that my child's well-being was going to come from anything else than the relationship with me. And so because of that, it was a bonus that I got to have this conversation with this person. rather than it being a necessity. And this goes back to my piece that I speak about when I say be cautious of labels. Highly sensitive children learn through their relationship with their parents, not through any other professional, not through anybody else who's taking care of your kid, even if they're at school for 6 hours a day most weeks out of the year, right? It's so important. And then the third thing that you need to be aware of when the question is, do I need a label? And the answer is, you don't always need a label, and it might not even be the thing you need to focus on, is that you need to be able to empower your child, right? My child didn't ask me to help her out in this dynamic because she was afraid of the teacher or afraid of the counselor or whatever. She had a choice. She had all kinds of choices. I want to go. I want to keep going. I want her to stop this one thing. I'm having a blast. And I don't really see that as a big of a deal. But Mom, I know you, and I know you're not going to let this slide because I kind of like doing push-ups. But I get why you're saying this isn't appropriate, right? And so we had a conversation about all of that. And she knew that what she needed in that dynamic. Labels don't define your children. My child is not being raised with an understanding that she has a crutch. She's not even criticizing herself. She was feeling frustrated in the dynamic and wanted support so that she could communicate effectively. And we're not asking for 6-year-olds or 7-year-olds or 9-year-olds to say the right thing every single time, right? So the counselor walked away from the conversation with words that she could use to encourage my child to say something different. My child walked away with words that she could use to say something different, and she could course correct her own language. And my child's also walking away with her identity intact. She's somebody who advocates for herself, who asks adults for help when they need it, who has fun and persists through challenge, and who doesn't have to deal with shame when it's used ineffectively, right, or used against her. That level of self-advocacy is a skill set that everybody needs in their life, right? Because if I was, if I didn't have the skill set that I needed, I would have pulled my kid out of camp. We don't need that, lady. Camp is a nice have, right? It's a luxury for us right now. We could pull you out. And that didn't even cross my mind because I've got these skills. And I want you to be able to notice that you can have these skills too. Your child can go to whatever for 5 days. Love it. First day is amazing. Bye, Mom. See you later. And that can happen in the school setting. That can happen in a camp setting. That can happen in a sports setting because all of that is true for you right now. And if it's not, then you need our help to fix it because the process of breaking out of this pattern doesn't start with your child. It starts with you. So how do we fix it? How do we break out of this pattern? The meltdown cycle is broken first from your assumption of how your child learns, your assumption of what's possible for your child and how fast they can learn it. And then thirdly, how you are playfully teaching your child to communicate more effectively so that they can have a conversation about their own needs and bust through any beliefs that adults don't want to hear what they have to say. And that might be an uphill battle, depending on what sort of school they're at, depending on what sort of education system you're plugged into, depending on any other community resources and how they've been talked to in the past, and what skill set your child has had in order to stand up for their needs. And so there's a big undertaking that requires a lot of work. It's not something a tip or a trick can solve. Now, in order to do that, showing your child that their voice matters, especially when they communicate safely, you need to be able to do this in a way that helps them combat shame and break out of that pattern in a playful manner, but also in a systematic manner. Because right now, your child's either screaming from the rooftops that the world is on fire, or their body's on fire and their emotions and their nervous system's on fire, or they're holding up, closed off, saying can't, won't, no way, and nobody's going to hear me. And they very well may be showing you the gamut of that big behavior from one pendulum to the next. And it's up to you to stay out of the pendulum of my kid can't do it, or my kid will do it come heck or high water right away, immediately, or else. And that process is something that you need a neutral party who can help you see outside yourself and see your blind spots, break out of that pattern. So if you want our help to do that, we're happy to support you in that. The first conversation with us to really understand and qualify whether or not what we do is going to be an appropriate fit and whether or not your needs are an appropriate fit for our specialty, that requires a conversation. We're happy to talk to you about what your challenges are, where you're stuck, what you want to break, what patterns you want to break out of with your family, what you've already tried, etc. And if your goals are in alignment with what we do, then we're happy to break that down for you on the very same phone call. And you can get started right away on that very same phone call. Again, you deserve peace in your home. Your child deserves peace in their heart. And you can break out of this in no time flat with commitment, dedication, and speed. And that's available to you. Okay, so happy to support you in breaking out of that pattern so that you can systematically and effectively do that repeatedly. And we're happy to have that conversation with you on the phone. Again, meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk or meganthompsoncoaching.com/teen talk. We're not talking about beating your kid out of over the head with meltdowns are inappropriate and this is wrong, or it's your fault and you need to keep it together. None of that stuff. None of that. We eliminate daily meltdowns through attachment focused, emotion management focused, leadership focused, and resilience focused work. And that has to be playful and enjoyable for everybody involved rather than manipulative or task oriented or checking the boxes and requiring your kid to do a thing at the snap of a finger. You have to find that middle dance to make that work magically. And it's absolutely possible for your family. Happy to speak with you about that. Again, we look forward to talking to you soon. Bye now.